All right. So we are here back on ShiftED podcasts. We're looking at how education has shifted over the last year during this COVID crisis that we're all going through. And today we're going to focus in a little bit on math education and how that has been affected. And there's a lot of stories in the news about how math is students are tending to struggle a little bit more. So I brought in two experts in the field. I have with us today Shana Rowen and Aliya Somani from English Montreal School Board, and they're two elementary school consultants. And we're going to talk about math and COVID. Wow, two amazing things. So welcome guys to ShiftED Ed podcasts. And
thank you.
Thanks so much for coming in and having this chat. So let's just situate yourselves a little bit. You guys want to just kind of tell us what your role is at your school board and the kinds of things you do, and just a little kind of background on you guys. Shana, Would you like to start?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my name is Shana. I'm the elementary math consultant at the EMSB, and I've been at it for 2 years. Before that, I was a high school teacher, actually, for over 10 years, but I'm elementary trained. So I have that experience of seeing at the elementary level what happens, and then also seeing where they're going into the high school level. Yeah.
And so very much like Shana, I think we have the same story. I actually started in 2016 at the school board. I'm the numeracy consultant at the board. And prior to that, I was teaching at Laurel Hill Academy for over 10 years as well. I'm also elementary trained, so had the elementary experience, but teaching high school, so knew where it was going.
That's cool. I mean, I think the best consultants have been in the trenches, right? I mean, we've experienced the highs and lows of teaching. And it brings us
it's funny though.
Yep, go ahead.
It's funny having this job though. You just want to go back into the classroom and change a whole bunch of things that you were doing. And in my head I was doing the right thing, but now as a consultant and having that time to just kind of read and do some of the research and just speaking to other people, you're like, oh man, I wish I could just go back and
absolutely
and change everything that I was doing.
You get all of these ideas that need to be shifted. Yeah. That's an interesting thing too. Like, do you guys tend to go in? I mean, under the situation, it's a little trickier, right, with the COVID and everything. But do you tend to do that as a practice, is to go into teachers' classrooms and actually kind of model?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was like, I think the main part of our job, the funnest part of our job. We were sometimes the two of us in 3 different schools on one day. Let's pack our day. Let's just do this. And it was anywhere from teaching grade 1 in the morning, and then you're teaching grade 6. It was just all levels and just interacting with all of them, all the kids, all the levels.
And I find that's the best part. One of the best parts of the job is really going into the classrooms and being able to see what the teachers are doing, but also being test different things, to model different things, interacting with teachers, with students. So I love the fact that we can do that and we have the liberty to see everything that's happening. And Aliya and I have over 30 schools that we can go to. So we have an abundance of teachers to work with, schools to work with, classes. And it's a great place to test different things into.
Exactly. It's also a reality check for us too. Like sometimes you start planning these things and in a perfect world, this is how it would go. But then you get into the classroom to test it. And it's nice to have that reality check, this is how it is. It allows us to do that experimentation process too, right?
I imagine that really informs your practice as well, right? I mean, you're going in and you're, boots to the ground, kind of seeing what happens with the ideas that you're bringing in and how teachers are interacting with it. I mean, I imagine it's quite validating for you guys when you go in.
Oh yeah. I think
for sure.
I have conversations all the time, and we're always working and collaborating together. And then the nice thing is, so we work together, and when we test it out, I think that, you know, shows us and informs us. And then we go back and we take it and we like test things out more. So it's always nice that we have that opportunity to collaborate together, get all our ideas together, and then really test it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's such a great thing. Well, speaking of that, so things have changed quite a bit, right? I guess our practice pool is a little is not as full as it used to be. But how do you think, how has it changed over the pandemic? You know, I mean, it's almost a year now that this has been going on now.
Yeah, I can't believe it.
Just the time seems to fly, but not fly at the same time. It's a weird situation we're in. But how is it, what have you noticed about the change in school? I mean, particularly in your field in math, since the pandemic has started. Have you guys noticed any, you know, great challenges or anything like that that have kind of surfaced up to the top?
I think I would have to say the hands-on approach of math. You know, that concrete level of teaching. I mean, we really try to enforce, you know, conceptual teaching and using manipulatives in classrooms, and especially with the younger grades, you know, when you're really learning the foundations of math, like try to make it as concrete, as touch as possible, as, you know, and I think that the pandemic has really made that hard because, you know, there's that fear, right? There's the fear of touching things, and kids are not really in groups anymore, and, you know, they're sitting in rows. It's a little bit of a different reality, you know, and I mean, we haven't really been able to see how the classrooms look like either, which is tough as well. But from what we're hearing, it's a little bit harder, you know, like teachers are not using these manipulatives just as much.
Shana, what do you
had to be very creative, I think. Yeah, kind of a similar thing that the challenge really was having that hands-on learning, and both in the classroom because of COVID and having some restrictions with their students, but also in the virtual settings. We do have a virtual school too. So it's been interesting to see the creative ways that teachers will try to go around that. With the online school, they have the virtual manipulatives that a lot of the teachers have used. So it's been interesting to explore that world and looking at websites that actually benefit the students. And if they don't have all the materials that they normally would have in school, what do they use? You know, they have those online tools. Aliya and I also put together a little package of paper manipulatives for the virtual school students, just to make sure that they're getting the same thing that they would maybe get in schools. So it's been an interesting, you know, trial and error and testing out different things, and the teachers are testing out different things in classes, and, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of cleaning going on.
For sure.
The one thing that we did actually experience this year, which was, I mean, it's kind of fun, and it brought us back to working with the kids, was one of the teachers, we were a guest in her classroom through Google Classroom. So, you know, as much as the pandemic has, you know, halted a lot of things, it was nice to say that we could still connect. We could still kind of go into this classroom, and, you know, having Zoom and Google Meet and all these different platforms that we, you know, have available to us. So we were actually a guest in a grade 4 class where we presented a situational problem to the kids. And it was funny because Shana and I were like acting it out. She was in her office, I was in mine. And we were acting it out and to the kids. And then the teacher would kind of interact with the students and, you know, ask the students for questions. And it was a lot of fun. And then once we presented it, the kids would, they were actually working in pairs of 2. So they had their masks and stuff on.
Sure.
When they had a question, they would come up to the computer after. So Shana and I became the expert station, like the consultant questioning station. So it was fun. It gave the kids an opportunity. Yeah, it was, and we had to be creative. You know, we had to be creative. So that was a cool experience.
Well, it kind of leads me into that question, and you are highlighting some successes that, I mean, I think we can feel down on, you know, like just, oh, we're stuck here, we're through Zoom, we can't touch anything, we can't be beside each other. But you're highlighting some beautiful successes as well, in the sense that there are ways to go about it, right? So that one strategy, I love that idea of being on Zoom. I've been doing a little bit of that as well, and the kids don't seem to be fazed with it too much. They'll just come right up, and particularly the elementary schools. I mean, the high school might be a different beast, but we're not going to talk about high school today.
We're elementary.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. So what are some other of those successes that you guys have had in this time? You know, like, have you noticed some of these really cool stories? The one like what you just shared? Have you seen other types of, wow, that would have never happened if we weren't isolated or we weren't, you know?
I think one of the other things that's a little separate is working actually with all the consultants from the different boards and having that opportunity. So like we know, typically we meet once a month with all the math and science consultants, but it's been more frequent now because we're getting used to using Zoom. So we're making time to really meet in smaller groups and develop different ideas and kind of put ourselves all on the same, you know, like we all discuss the same things and have the same ideas and share the successes that are happening in our boards and the things that we find challenging and helping each other out. And I find that has been really positive because we've gotten a lot of different ideas from different boards. So that work has been really, I find that has been really great this year too.
Yeah, for sure.
Like all that information we can bring back to our teachers too. So it's been kind of really fun to have more discussions outside that we can then inform practice with our teachers.
It's true. It's like you and I collaborate a lot, but we had just given a recent workshop on situational problems actually. And, you know, Shana and I spent hours just kind of developing a checklist and trying to just collaborate with each other and then presenting it with the rest of the consultants in our group, in the group. And they just brought out a whole new spin on things, stuff that Shana and I had just didn't necessarily think about, you know. So it's nice because the two of us are always in this little bubble, right? Like we work together, we work really well together, but you know, sometimes your thought process is almost the same when you're working with the same person. And so it was nice to present it and have a really different point of view and just kind of, once again, you know, just inform us of like, oh, this would make it a little bit better, or hey, have you thought about this? So, you know, and just kind of perfecting what we have. It's still obviously a draft and stuff of what we're working on, but it was nice. You're absolutely right. It's nice to have that collaboration. And had we not had this pandemic, we would still be just meeting once a month. And, you know, it's only the like the stuff that has to get discussed. You know?
Right. Oh no, collaboration, if it's humming properly, it's a magical thing, right? And you get these totally different perspectives on thoughts that you might have had or ideas that just transforms, which is unbelievable.
And the pandemic has really allowed that to come out, like really allowed us to have that time to collaborate and talk.
It kind of shows too, like these skills that we always talk about, right? Collaboration and problem solving. They start to come out in these kinds of situations, and you're sure glad that you have those skills, right? that you have that capacity to collaborate and kind of connect with somebody via, you know, distance and still kind of get things done. I would argue too that we're getting more things done just because we're in schools less, you know, as consultants, we're much more able to create and share resources and stuff like that. So, I mean, there's some really cool things about it. I'm finding as well. Now, if we were to kind of talk a little bit about the actual program. Now, the program, I know you guys have gone through this adventure of, I mean, trying to explain to teachers and to, you know, what it is, what we're supposed to be doing. So I'm going to just throw that out there. What is elementary math all about? What's the main idea behind our program that exists here in Quebec? That's a huge question.
Yeah, big question. I mean, well, it is centered around competencies. Yeah. And so there is one competency, which is solving situational problems, which is, I guess, the big one in terms of discussion of how to. There's application questions, mastery style questions. That's competency 2. And then there's actually a third competency, but it's not evaluated or reported on, let's say, which is that communication aspect in math, you know, and the language that's used in math and, you know, how kids explain themselves and, you know, how they explain the process of what they're doing and just that discourse, you know, having that conversation. So I would say that it's centered around those 3 competencies. It's definitely a developmental, like especially competency 1, that situational Competency is, it's a developmental. It's making kids into problem solvers. You know, it's turning kids into really being problem solvers.
Right, thinkers, being able to abstract on things. And do you guys tend to bring in computational thinking into elementary, like just the basic ideas of decomposition, and like, do those come into play ever in elementary math?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's the kids are, you know, obviously at the grade 1, grade 2 level, it's using basic math language when they're talking about computation and how they're doing and what they're doing. You know, at those levels, we really want it to be more concrete, more hands-on, more, you know, but they are explaining what they're doing, and it's maybe more in their own, it's intuitive, right? So it's using their own kind of language. And then as they get into the older grades, yeah, that language is richer. They're looking at, you know, different properties of math. You know, in addition, you're looking at the associative and commutative, and, you know, those properties, they do get discussed, and how kids, you know, we want kids being able to explain what they're doing through that proper math vocabulary.
Right. They say that making learning visible, right? Are you able to express what you've learned in your own words?
Yeah. No, that's definitely really important. Making it visual and having able to talk about it is super, super important. I completely agree with that. Yeah.
Right. And them building their vocabulary, their math vocabulary, really, right?
Exactly.
So Shana, my question to you, you talked about the two main competencies. What's the difference between an application versus a situational problem? So, I mean, this is probably the thing that you guys talk about the most. And I know you guys have done a ton of work on situational problems. But I think they get confused. They kind of get muddied together at times. Like when you're talking to a teacher, how do you describe the two in different terms?
Yeah, no, it is something actually that comes up a lot. So there can be confusion, especially at the lower grades. A situational problem, typically, not always, but typically is longer. It is often open-ended, so the students are able to get multiple answers, and it often includes multiple concepts kind of mixed in together. And you can take concepts from, you know, the beginning of the year. You can take concepts from prior years of study. You may not have seen that pairing of concepts together before. And the example that I give often to the teachers, especially we had a workshop yesterday. We talked about, you know, a problem that's in grade 4 that involves, it's a situational problem that involves Cartesian plane and fractions. And often we don't see fractions paired with Cartesian plane. So it's something very new. So the concepts are seen in a new way in the situational problems. But the students have seen fractions before, and they've seen it since, you know, grade 1. They have seen Cartesian plane before in various ways throughout the cycles. So in that situational problem, and I think it's a really good example, the concepts are seen completely new because in a new way, because they're not usually paired together. So the students have to use their knowledge of those concepts within the problem. Whereas an application question typically is a little bit shorter, typically only has one answer. Focuses maybe on a concept that you're doing in that specific unit. I don't know, Aliya.
I mean, I guess, you know, the application question too kind of does focus on an answer, right? At one point, you know, you do want to know that the kids have the concepts and that they're understanding it, and that they can prove to a certain extent that they know what they're doing. And so competency 2 really, you know, it's really that mathematical reasoning, but it's, do you know the math? Like, do you know it? Whereas a situational problem, as Shana and I say, like, it kind of takes more of a science approach. You know, it's, you have a problem, you're presented with this problem, and what do you think we're going to do? What's the plan? What do you think? How are we going to approach this? And then you test it out, and if it doesn't work, okay, let's go back. Let's test something else. You know, and Shana's mentioning there's multiple answers, right? In a situational problem, you have that opportunity to explore. It's more real life. You know, it's more, if whatever types of math problems you have in real life, you know, there's different answers that are going to be possible. And so I think that competency really tries to mimic that part of it. Competency 2 is really more, in that nutshell, how do you do this math? Like what's the process behind this math?
Right. I love that you guys bring that into process. I mean, go ahead, Shana. I love that.
I was going to go with that too. Something I forgot to mention before that Aliya had mentioned is really looking at the process. So in the situational problem, you're going to focus on really looking at the student's understanding of the problem and the process that they're going through. And like, I love bringing in the science aspect too, is, students might go through that process of trial and error or testing out kind of a hypothesis that they think will work in a situational problem, and they might have to go back and fix it. So really that end answer is not necessarily the focus. It's really focusing on, can they understand the problem and can they work through the process of solving it and really show that they understand what they're doing.
Yeah, for sure. So that they are growing their competency, right? I mean, again, if we go back to the old new program that we had, right? Competency based is exactly that, right? Getting kids to go through that process over and over and over again. And I think also just making students realize that everything's process, right? Everything that we do or try to accomplish, we have to go through our process, right? And it's just part of life. And you can see it in every other subject, right?
That's it. And I mean, it's fun, but I find that a lot of kids, there's that fear, right? There's that anxiety with math, as we talk about math anxiety, and I think it comes from having a right or wrong answer. There's more than one right answer, and so because of that, I find it allows that math anxiety to kind of go away, and I think it just depends on how you approach it. For sure, if you approach it, there's always that, but the ministry exam is like this, and so I feel, yes, for sure. If we think about it that way, it is a daunting task. But if we really think about it as, here's a problem, let's try to solve this. What's our, what are we doing? And the approach that you take to it, it really does allow for that math anxiety to kind of go away instead of adding on to it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that can cripple a child. Anxiety, and you see that also in science areas as well. By the time the kid hits high school, that student is petrified about math and science. They just think they can't do it. They have this closed mindset that I'll never be good at it. So I think those younger ages, exactly what you guys are saying, that developing that competency in themselves, that they can solve those problems. But saying it's one thing and doing it's a total other thing. So we're going to end on this big question, and you can go as out of the box as you want. What do you guys see? Where do we go from here? Like, what are some ways that we can get kids seeing math as something they're going to need in real life, rather than this abstract kind of I don't understand kind of thing? How do we bring them closer to that in an elementary setting?
I mean, maybe this is not so out of the box, but I mean, situational problems are that real world scenarios. And I find they feel like they're not just doing math to do math. A lot of the time, if we look at some of the ones that we have, some of them are like planning trips, going on a road trip. You can do building a house or looking at a different room. So it feels really real world. So less abstract. They're using the math in something that potentially they can use in the real world. So I think if we move towards that and giving them scenarios that they potentially could live through, or they have lived through, that I feel that the students are more connected. I definitely think that's a positive move towards, taking away the math anxiety and making it just feel like that's something that they're going to have to live through.
Even like teaching through that problem-based learning, like teaching through problem solving instead of like having, here's my lesson and then, let's give them problem solving questions. It'd almost be like, here's a problem solving question. Let's learn the math through this problem. I'm giving you purpose to learn this math. It's not just, let's just learn it because it's part of the curriculum and I have to do it and there's an exam at the end. It's here's a problem, here's a task. Now with this task, what are the math things you have to know, and let's learn them, right? So I think that approach really, that's something I think I would go back if I was back in the classroom, and I would change for sure. I used to be that teacher, especially in the high school, you give the kids notes and then you practice. And going back, I think I would do it completely different. I would give them the problem and say, here's a problem. Let's try to figure it out. What do you need? What do you
Right.
need to figure this out? And
Yeah.
okay, you don't know. Let's learn that concept now.
Yeah. It seems like a little tweak, but a powerful tweak, you know, in the sense that you're giving them onus more, you know, putting more on the student. I love this quote, less us, more them. You know, if we get out of their way more and give them more to play with and discover, I mean, they're going to get there. They'll get there. You know, it's just exposure and practice, really.
And there's a lot of intuitiveness, right? Kids have that intuitiveness.
For sure.
We sometimes take that intuitiveness away from them by teaching them procedure, you know? Right. So you're right.
Well, that's a big statement.
It is. I mean,
I agree with you though, for sure. That's a good quote there. I'm going to keep that one in my pocket. Well, I think, you know, you guys working as you do would make any math teacher want to change. I mean, I think I'm super happy to talk with you guys, and just, I feel the optimism, you know, and I think that we need troops on the ground with that optimism going into classrooms and supporting teachers in that way, so that we can make math a beautiful thing, which it is, you know. I mean, it's like we say with science, it's all around us. Math is all around us as well. So it's something that's definitely the beginning of a conversation, but not the end. I want to thank you guys so much for taking some time and talking with us. I really appreciate your ideas, and good luck with the rest of this school year. I hope that you guys can find a little reprieve over the March break coming up, and then
yes, looking forward to it.
The sprint to the end. And hopefully we'll all be back in classrooms in the following year or so. We'll keep our fingers crossed. Anyway, good luck to you guys, and take care, and we'll be talking again soon.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.